The teenager regarded Leonard for a moment longer, his sharp gaze softening slightly. He nodded, reached into his pocket, and pulled out not a single dollar, but a crisp $20 bill, crouched down to Leonard's level, handing it to him directly. "Here, get yourself something warm to eat, and some coffee." His voice was steady, but there was a warmth to it that caught Leonard off guard. Leonard stared at the bill, his fingers trembling as he took it. "Thank you," he murmured, his voice barely audible over the city's noise. For the first time in what felt like forever, someone had stopped, seen him, and truly cared. But the teenager didn't leave right away. Instead, he sat down next to Leonard on the cold concrete, ignoring the gasps and murmurs of the onlookers who now recognized him. "What's your name?" the boy asked, breaking the stunned silence. Leonard blinked, unsure of what to say. "Leonard," he replied hesitantly. "And you?" "Barron," the boy said simply, offering a small smile. He didn't elaborate, but Leonard suddenly remembered where he'd seen that face before. It was the face plastered on news channels, tabloids, and social media, the youngest son of one of the most famous and controversial figures in the world. "You're him," Leonard said, realization dawning. "Barron Trump." Barron nodded, unfazed. "That's me, but right now I'm just someone who wants to listen. Tell me, Leonard, how'd you end up here?" Leonard hesitated. It wasn't a story he liked to share, but something about Barron's calm presence and genuine interest made him open up. He spoke of lost jobs, the death of his wife, estranged children, and the downward spiral that had led him to this street corner. As Leonard spoke, Barron listened intently, asking thoughtful questions and offering words of encouragement. Minutes turned into an hour, and by the end of their conversation, Leonard felt a spark of hope he hadn't felt in years. Before leaving, Barron made a promise. "I'll be back, Leonard, and I'll do what I can to help you get back on your feet." True to his word, Barron returned the next day, this time with resources, contacts for shelters, job opportunities, and a warm coat. But what neither of them expected was the ripple effect of their encounter. A passerby had filmed their initial conversation, and the video went viral overnight. The world watched as a teenager from a life of privilege extended kindness to a man society had overlooked. The story inspired countless others to reach out to the homeless in their communities, sparking a nationwide movement of compassion. Donations poured in for Leonard, who used the funds to secure housing and reconnect with his children. Barron, meanwhile, continued his quiet acts of kindness, proving that even the smallest gesture could change lives. And Leonard, once invisible to the bustling city, found himself surrounded by a community that finally saw him for who he truly was, a man with a story, a name, and a future. Leonard's hand trembled as he reached out to take the bill. I don't know what to say," he stammered, his voice cracking under the weight of emotion. Barron smiled softly, his expression steady but kind. "You don't have to say anything," he replied. "Just promise me you'll use this to take the first step, whatever that looks like for you." Leonard swallowed hard, his throat tight. The $100 bill wasn't just money, it was a lifeline, a reminder that someone still believed he was worth helping. He nodded, his voice barely audible. "Thank you." But Barron wasn't finished. Standing up, he looked around at the gathering crowd, his sharp eyes scanning the faces of strangers who had paused to gawk. He addressed Leonard again, but this time his voice was louder, more deliberate. "This man isn't invisible," Barron said, his words cutting through the noise of the city. "He has a name, he has a story, and he deserves to be treated with dignity." The murmurs in the crowd grew quieter, the weight of his words settling over the bystanders. Leonard felt his cheeks flush, but not from embarrassment this time. There was a strange comfort in being seen, truly seen, for the first time in years. Barron reached into his pocket again and handed Leonard a business card. "This is for a shelter and resource center a few blocks from here," he explained. "They'll help you get started. Food, a bed, maybe even some work. Tell them Barron sent you." Leonard accepted the card, his hands still trembling. He didn't know how to express the gratitude welling up inside him, so he simply nodded. "I'll do my best," he whispered. Barron smiled again and gave him a reassuring pat on the shoulder. "That's all anyone can ask." As Barron turned to leave, the crowd began to disperse, but their whispers lingered. Phones were out, cameras rolling, capturing the moment. What had started as a quiet exchange between two people was now a scene that would ripple far beyond that Cleveland street corner. Leonard watched as Barron walked away, his sleek white sneakers blending into the flow of the city. The young man had given more than money. He had given hope. For the first time in what felt like forever, Leonard felt a... Barron met Leonard's gaze directly, his expression calm but resolute. "You're right," he said quietly. "Most people don't stop. Most people look the other way. But maybe that's exactly why I should." Leonard blinked, caught off guard by the honesty in Barron's words. For a moment he didn't know what to say. The young man's presence, his sincerity, it all felt different, real. Barron continued, his voice steady but softer. "I don't need anything from you, Leonard. But I know this. If I can help you see that things can get better, maybe you'll start to believe it too. And maybe someday you'll help someone else who's in your shoes right now." Leonard's grip tightened on the bill and the note. The weight of Barron's words pressed against the walls of doubt he had built around himself. For the first time in a long while, someone had not only seen him, but had also believed in him. Barron stood up, brushing dust off his knees. "I'll leave you to think about it," he said, stepping back. "But remember, this isn't just about today. It's about what comes next." He turned to leave, the murmurs of the crowd growing louder as he began to walk away. Leonard watched him go, feeling a strange mix of gratitude and fear. Gratitude for the help, fear for the challenge. Could he really change his life? Did he have it in him? As Barron disappeared into the sea of city dwellers, Leonard looked down at the $100 bill and the address on the note. He read it again, this time slower, letting the words sink in. "Tomorrow," he whispered to himself, clutching the note tightly. "I'll go tomorrow." And as the city carried on around him, Leonard felt something he hadn't felt in years. A spark of hope. It wasn't just about the money. It wasn't even about the words. It was about the promise, the belief that someone like him could still have a chance. For the first time in what felt like forever, Leonard dared to believe that maybe, just maybe, tomorrow could be different. Leonard took a deep breath, staring at the entrance. The words, "Hope Outreach Resource Center," seemed to glow faintly in the morning light, a beacon he hadn't realized he needed. The lump in his throat returned, but this time it wasn't from fear. It was from the weight of possibility. He stepped through the doors, his heart pounding in his chest. Inside, the building was warm and bustling with quiet activity. A receptionist greeted him with a kind smile, her eyes bright with welcome. "Good morning," she said. "How can we help you today?" Leonard hesitated, his voice catching. He reached into his pocket, pulling out the note with the address. A young man told me to come here," he stammered. "Said you could help." The receptionist's face softened, her smile growing wider. "You must be Leonard," she said, as if she already knew him. "We've been expecting you." Leonard blinked, caught off guard. "You... have?" "Barron called ahead," she explained. "He wanted to make sure we were ready to help you get started." Hearing Barron's name made Leonard's chest tighten. This wasn't just a passing gesture. The teenager had followed through, making sure Leonard wouldn't fall through the cracks. "Follow me," the receptionist said, guiding him to a small office where a counselor waited. Over the next hour, Leonard shared his story again, this time with a mix of vulnerability and cautious hope. The counselor listened attentively, offering resources and a plan tailored to his needs: temporary housing, access to food, medical care, and even a job training program. By the time he left the center, Leonard felt a weight lifting from his shoulders. He had a path now, a direction. It wasn't going to be easy, but for the first time in years, he believed it was possible. As he stepped back onto the street, the cold air stinging his face, Leonard thought of Barron. He reached into his jacket and pulled out the $100 bill, staring at it for a long moment. It wasn't just money, it was a symbol of faith, a reminder that someone had seen him and believed in him. Leonard decided then and there he wouldn't let it go to waste. This was his second chance, and he was going to make it count. And though Barron had disappeared into the crowd the day before, Leonard knew he wasn't alone anymore. Somewhere out there, someone cared, and that was enough to light a fire in him he thought had been extinguished long ago. As he walked toward his temporary shelter, his steps felt lighter, his head held higher. The road ahead would be long, but for the first time in a long time, Leonard was ready to take it one step at a time. But genuine words of encouragement, as if they, too, believed in his potential. Fellow shelter residents who had heard fragments of his story began to see him differently, with a mix of respect and curiosity. He was no longer just a nameless face among them. He had become a symbol of hope, a reminder that change was possible. Leonard found himself looking forward to each new day. He met with his caseworker regularly, working on a structured plan that mapped out achievable goals. They talked about rebuilding not just his financial stability, but also his self-worth, piece by piece. For the first time in a long while, Leonard allowed himself to imagine a future that was more than just surviving day to day. Barron's unexpected kindness had sparked not just a viral moment, but a genuine movement. More donations flooded into the Hope Outreach Resource Center, allowing it to expand its services and reach more people in need. Volunteers signed up in record numbers, eager to be part of something that felt meaningful. Leonard watched it unfold from within, marveling at how a single moment could set so much in motion. One afternoon, a staff member handed Leonard a printed-out article. It was an editorial from a major newspaper, praising Barron's gesture and highlighting Leonard's courage in embracing the opportunity. The words struck Leonard deeply. He never thought he would read something positive about himself, let alone in print. But the part that affected him most was a quote from Barron himself. Leonard represents the strength and resilience that so many people have, even when society overlooks them. Helping him was the least I could do. I believe in him, and I know he will make a difference. Reading those words, Leonard felt a surge of determination. It wasn't just about proving Barron right. It was about proving himself worthy of the belief others now had in him. As days turned into weeks, Leonard began to thrive. He attended job interviews with a renewed sense of confidence, and soon enough, he landed a part-time position that would provide both income and stability. He began attending group counseling sessions, finding a sense of camaraderie among others who had walked similar hard paths. Each step forward felt like a triumph, a small victory in a long battle. And every night, before he fell asleep, Leonard would hold the now faded note in his hands, a tangible reminder of the promise he had made. A promise to keep fighting, to keep growing, and to never give up on himself again. Barron's act of kindness had sparked a chain reaction, but it was Leonard's resilience and determination that kept it going. Together, they had shown the world that no one is beyond hope, and that a simple act of compassion could indeed change lives, beginning with one man and rippling outward to inspire countless others. Leonard's journey became a symbol for the transformative power of hope and compassion. As he continued to rebuild his life, he found himself not only drawing strength from those around him, but also giving it back. The shelter staff often encouraged him to share his story during community gatherings, where he spoke openly about his struggles and the moment that changed everything. His words resonated deeply with others. People who had felt invisible and hopeless began to see that change was possible, that someone could fall and rise again. Leonard became a mentor of sorts within the shelter, offering advice, encouragement, and even the occasional tough love to those who were just starting their journeys. Meanwhile, the movement sparked by Barron's act of kindness only grew. The hashtags continued to trend, and stories of small but meaningful gestures poured in from around the country. From strangers paying for groceries to entire communities organizing drives for those in need, the message was clear. Kindness was contagious. Leonard's relationship with his brother Paul also flourished. The two spent hours catching up on lost time, reminiscing about their childhood and making plans for the future. Paul helped Leonard navigate the more challenging aspects of his new life, from managing finances to preparing for job interviews. Their bond, once fractured, became a source of strength for both men. Eventually, Leonard landed a full-time job at a local nonprofit, assisting others who were facing the same challenges he had once endured. His work was meaningful, and each day felt like a step toward redemption, not just for himself but for everyone he helped. Leonard often reflected on how a single moment of kindness had set this all in motion. As for Barron, he remained in the background, content to let the story belong to Leonard and the movement it had inspired. He continued to support the Hope Outreach Resource Center anonymously, ensuring that its programs could expand and reach even more people. When asked about the incident in rare interviews, he would simply say, "It wasn't about me. It was about showing that we all have the power to make a difference." Years later, Leonard stood on a stage at a fundraising event for the shelter that had once saved him. Looking out at the audience, he felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude, not just for Barron, but for everyone who had supported him along the way. "My story isn't unique," he said, his voice steady and full of conviction. "There are so many people out there who just need a little hope, a little kindness, to remind them that they're not alone. I was lucky enough to find that hope, and now it's my turn to pass it on." The audience erupted into applause, and among them, standing quietly in the back, was Barron. He didn't stay for the rest of the event, slipping out before anyone could notice him. But as he walked into the night, he couldn't help but smile. Leonard's journey had come full circle, and the ripples of that one small act of kindness were still spreading, changing lives in ways neither of them could have ever imagined.